On my 29th birthday, my parents walked into my apartment without knocking and dropped a folder on my table as if it were the bill for my existence. My father laughed first, a soft, satisfied kind of laugh that fills a room faster than smoke. My mother didn't bother to sit. She just tapped the folder and said my sister's future was now secured. They never noticed the candle on the cake behind them, slowly burning itself out. I didn't argue. I didn't even ask why. I only asked myself one question in my head. How long until they realized what they took wasn't mine to lose? I learned early that silence was easier than asking for anything. Growing up, our house always sounded like someone else's life, Grace's piano lessons echoing down the hallway, my mother cheering from the kitchen, my father's voice booming with plans made for her, never with her. I moved around that. Noise like a shadow, careful not to interrupt the music of their expectations. Money was the first thing they took without asking. I was 17 when my father borrowed the savings from my part-time job. He stood at the doorway jingling his keys, saying it was for something important. He never told me what dot my mother said family shared everything. Grace got a new dress that week. I did the math on my own dot by 20. I'd learned to keep my victories small. When I got my first certification in data security, my father skimmed the paper and asked if I could fix his password problems. My mother changed the subject to Grace's internship. At dinner that night, only one story mattered, and it wasn't mine dot, so I worked quietly, consistently, every extra hour at the office, every freelance job on the weekends, every invitation I said no to. I funneled it all into a savings account the way some people write diaries. Numbers became my timeline. My 20s passed inside spreadsheets no one else would ever read. I lived in a cheap studio then, thin walls, a rattling heater, a taped-up window that whistled in winter. Still, every month, I transferred whatever. I could $100, 300, sometimes 1,000 when a bonus came through. The balance rose slowly, like water filling a cracked glass. Never fast, never clean, but steady. I was proud, not of the money itself, but because it was mine, untouched, unclaimed. Proof that I wasn't entirely invisible, but each year my family reminded me exactly where I stood. Grace's graduation party lasted a week. Mine ended before the cake melted. When she landed her first job, relatives toasted to her bright future. When I got a promotion, my father handed me a list of bills he needed me to cover just for this month. My mother smiled gently and said I didn't mind helping. Everyone nodded, assuming generosity was my personality. Instead of my only choice, the worst moment came 6 years ago. I had just finished a major project, the kind that changes careers. I walked into my parents' living room, hoping for even a small acknowledgement. Instead, they were in mid-conversation about Grace's newest idea. I stood there holding my folder like a guest who'd arrived at the wrong house. That was the day I learned my place in this family, not the star. Not even the supporting role. Just the resource they'd forgotten could run out. On my birthday, my father pushed a folder across my table like paperwork I had already agreed to. My mother drifted behind him, arms folded, eyes scanning my apartment, as if inspecting a hotel room she didn't plan to stay in. I opened the folder because staying still was the only thing I trusted myself to do, Doc. The first page was a withdrawal confirmation. The number didn't make sense at first. My brain refused to attach meaning to something so absolute. $2,900,000. 10 years of extra hours, skipped holidays. Careful budgets, gone in a single signature. My father let out a short laugh, tapping the page. Thanks, he said. Your money secured your sister's sure. My mother adjusted her sleeve. You would have wasted it anyway, she added. Not cruel. Not angry. Just certain. Something inside me paused. Not a feeling, not a thought, just a final understanding. Grace wasn't there, but her name lived in every breath they took. Her future, her needs, her world. Mine didn't exist. I didn't argue. I didn't ask why. Those were habits they had trained into me. Instead, I let the silence sit between us, heavy and deliberate. Then I did the one thing they never expected. I laughed, not loudly, not mockingly, just a quiet exhale shaped into a sound they mistook for surrender. But it wasn't surrender. It was recognition, because what they took wasn't my real savings. The folder they dropped held numbers they assumed belonged to me, a decoy I had built 3 years earlier, a perfect mirror of my real savings, a trap designed for the wrong hands. Deposits matched my patterns. Transfers looked authentic. Balances rose exactly as expected, but the account was never meant to be used. Only to be stolen. The morning after my birthday, I sat with my coffee and opened my logs. Every transfer, every pattern, every flag was documented. The fraud alert had already triggered the moment they accessed the money. My real savings lived somewhere else entirely untouched. I texted my lawyer. They accessed the flagged account. His reply came instantly, proceed. Then I did something simpler, something quieter. I removed my parents from every auto payment I had kept running out of habit, not loyalty. One by one, I canceled them: insurance, utilities, their so-called emergency fund. Each click was a boundary finally drawn. The next morning, the first bank alert came. Unusual activity detected. Then the phone rang. My father's voice exploded before I could speak. "What did you do, Ruby? The bank froze everything." "They're investigating us," my mother shouted in the background, frantic. "Fix this. You're ruining our reputation." Grace is in tears. I took a sip of coffee. "You mean the future my money supposedly secured?" Silence. A door closing at last stop by midday. They had called 8 times, Grace twice. I didn't answer. That evening, the news ran a short segment. Local couple under investigation for suspected financial misconduct. Their arrogance was gone, replaced by panic. The next day, my mother came to my apartment shaking. Investigators came. They asked about transfers, about statements. "Your father almost fainted. Help us." I leaned against the counter. "I told you not to touch what wasn't yours. We're your parents," she snapped. "Everything we did was for the family." "For Grace," I corrected. Her voice cracked. "You set us up?" "No," I said calmly. "You walked into a system you didn't understand." The investigation unfolded exactly as designed. Emails, notices, formal audits. Then a final message from my lawyer. They triggered the full audit. Everything is moving exactly as expected. I stepped onto my balcony, letting warm air wash over me. The city moved beneath me, indifferent and steady. They hadn't just stolen from me. They had stepped into a trap I built slowly, quietly, patiently, the way they taught me to survive. Rain came that night, soft and steady. On the table beside me lay an old photo of my father and me at a beach. A story that no longer belonged to me. Later that week, Grace sent a letter. She had enrolled in a program for women rebuilding their finances. She said she understood if I didn't want to reply. It wasn't an apology, just awareness. Finally, I set her letter next to the photograph and watched the rain fall. Eventually, I drove to the coast, the same place from the picture. I stood where the waves touched my feet and whispered, "I forgive you." Not for them, for me. Some boundaries aren't spoken. They're drawn the moment you stop returning to the places that taught you to shrink. My family once believed I would carry their mistakes forever. That silence meant obedience. But silence is a tool. One I learned to use differently. I didn't break the cycle. I simply stepped out of it. The ocean moved in quiet rhythms behind me as I walked back to my car, leaving the past where it finally belonged. If you want more stories told in this quiet kind of truth, stay for the next.